Growth is often seen as a sign of civilizational success. Expanding populations, growing cities, increasing trade. But the archaeological record reveals a paradox. The same growth that strengthens a society can also create the conditions for its decline. When populations expand, basic needs multiply. More people require more food, more water, more resources. Societies respond by intensifying agriculture and clearing new land. For generations, this works well. But intensive use creates long-term pressures that aren't immediately visible. The Maya lowlands offer a clear example. Between 250 and 800 CE, Maya cities flourished across the Yucatan Peninsula. Archaeological evidence shows sophisticated urban planning and dense populations. To support these cities, communities cleared forests and built terraced fields. Soil studies indicate that by the 8th century, environmental conditions were changing. Deforestation altered climate patterns. Soils showed nutrient depletion. Evidence suggests several severe droughts occurred, stressing agricultural systems with little reserve capacity. Over roughly a century, most major Maya urban centers were gradually abandoned. Economic systems face similar pressures. As societies expand, they develop specialized production and long-distance trade. This increases efficiency, but creates dependencies. When trade networks break down, societies lose access to essential resources. The Bronze Age Mediterranean illustrates this vulnerability. By 1300 BCE, civilizations across the region were deeply interconnected. Copper, tin, grain, and goods flowed along established routes. Around 1200 BCE, this network collapsed. Climate records suggest widespread drought. Archaeological sites show abandonment across the region. Without functioning trade, cities that depended on imported resources faced critical shortages. Administrative complexity grows alongside populations. Managing larger societies requires more officials, more record-keeping, more layers of governance. But complexity comes with costs. The system becomes less flexible and harder to reform. The Western Roman Empire shows how this unfolded. By the 3rd and 4th centuries, the empire had developed an elaborate administrative structure. Evidence suggests that administrative costs consumed an increasing share of revenue. As the apparatus expanded, its ability to respond to new challenges declined. Standard procedures replaced adaptive problem-solving. When rapid decisions were needed, information had to pass through multiple layers of bureaucracy. Local officials reported to regional administrators who reported to imperial authorities. What once took days now required weeks or months. Meanwhile, problems on the ground intensified. The system had become so elaborate that it could no longer respond with the speed that changing circumstances demanded. Infrastructure offers another example of how growth creates maintenance burdens. The Roman road network stretched over 250,000 miles at its peak. Aqueducts brought water to cities across 3 continents. These engineering achievements enabled trade, military movement, and urban life. But they also required constant upkeep. As imperial revenues declined, maintaining this infrastructure became increasingly difficult. Roads fell into disrepair. Aqueducts developed leaks that went unfixed. Bridges weakened without replacement. The very systems that had connected the empire began to fragment. Regional areas became more isolated, further weakening economic integration and administrative control. Social structures can also become strained. Archaeological evidence often shows widening inequality as civilizations develop. Elites accumulate larger shares of resources. The gap between social classes widens, creating tensions that weaken social cohesion. The ancestral Puebloans of Chaco Canyon demonstrate this pattern. Between 900 and 1150 CE, this society constructed massive stone buildings in what is now New Mexico. These projects required coordinated labor from communities across the region. Archaeological findings suggest resources were increasingly directed toward ceremonial structures, while housing for common people remained modest. Tree ring records show drought frequency increased in the 12th century. As environmental stress mounted, the social consensus that supported large communal projects appears to have fractured. Communities that once contributed labor and resources to Chaco Canyon began to question whether the system served their interests. By 1150, the canyon was abandoned. People dispersed to areas with more reliable water, reorganizing into smaller, more autonomous settlements. Population concentration itself can become a vulnerability. Large urban centers offer advantages in defense, trade, and cultural exchange, but they also require steady flows of food, water, and fuel from surrounding regions. When those supply lines weaken, cities become difficult to sustain. Historians suggest that many ancient cities existed at the edge of what their environments could support. A single bad harvest might be manageable, but several poor years in succession could trigger a crisis. Urban populations that couldn't be fed would disperse to rural areas where they could grow their own food. Once this migration began, it often accelerated. Fewer people meant less labor for maintenance, less tax revenue for administration, and weaker defenses. Perhaps the deepest vulnerability is the loss of adaptability. Successful societies develop established methods that become embedded in institutions. When circumstances remain stable, this is valuable. But when conditions change significantly, established approaches may no longer work. Societies that have succeeded for generations may struggle to recognize when their methods have become inadequate. Innovation often comes from the margins, from people willing to experiment with new approaches. But as societies become more complex and hierarchical, they may become less receptive to innovation. Established institutions have invested heavily in existing methods. Changing course would require admitting that traditional approaches are insufficient, which can be difficult for those in positions of authority. The historical evidence indicates that decline rarely results from a single cause. Multiple pressures accumulate over time. Environmental degradation reduces productivity. Economic networks become fragile. Administrative systems grow inflexible. Social tensions increase. Each stress compounds the others. What we call collapse is actually a gradual transformation. Urban centers may be abandoned, but people continue in smaller communities. Political structures change, but knowledge persists. The process typically spans generations rather than occurring suddenly. These patterns reveal that growth creates both opportunities and vulnerabilities. Expansion allows remarkable achievements, but it generates complexity and pressures that require constant management. When societies stop adapting or maintaining their systems, they accumulate risks that eventually undermine their foundations. The civilizations we've examined didn't fail because of single dramatic events. They declined gradually as accumulated stresses exceeded their capacity to adapt. The precise details remain subjects of ongoing research, but the broader pattern appears consistent. Decline is a slow process, driven by multiple overlapping pressures, resulting in transformation rather than sudden disappearance.